Marcus Webb woke up every morning at 4:45 a.m. Not because he loved early mornings. Not because it felt good. He woke up that early because it was the only way to get everything done. Before the sun came up, he was already in the kitchen making breakfast for his 7-year-old daughter, Amara. He would pack her lunch, iron her school uniform, braid her hair the best way he knew how, and then drop her off at school by 7:30. After that, he would drive his old silver van 30 minutes across town to his small workshop space, a rented unit in a worn-down industrial building on the east side of Detroit. The workshop was not much to look at. The walls had paint peeling off them. The floor had old oil stains that never fully came out. There were 2 second-hand machines he had bought from a closing factory, a folding table he used as a desk, and shelves lined with materials he had carefully sourced at the lowest prices he could find. It was small. It was rough. But to Marcus, that place was everything. It was the beginning of something. He could feel it, even when no one else could. Marcus made specialty wood and metal packaging, custom display boxes, branded crates, and handcrafted storage containers for small businesses and boutique brands. He had started the business 3 years earlier with $4,000 he had saved while working double shifts at a logistics warehouse. He had no business degree. He had no investor. He had no safety net. What he had was a skill he had learned from his grandfather, a steady pair of hands, and a hunger that would not quit. The business was growing slowly. Slowly was the key word. He had about 11 regular clients, most of them small local shops. His monthly revenue was sitting just under $9,000, and after rent, materials, equipment maintenance, and Amara's school fees, there was not much left over. He drove a van that needed new brakes. He had not bought himself new clothes in 2 years. But Amara had everything she needed. That part he made sure of. The problem Marcus faced was not his product. Everyone who worked with him said the quality was outstanding. The problem was that he could not get in front of the bigger buyers. He did not have the right connections. He did not know how to pitch to large corporations. And every time he applied to vendor programs or business development events, he felt like he was walking into rooms where people looked right through him. That is what brought him to the Midwest Regional Business Summit in Chicago on a Tuesday in late October. He had used part of his savings to pay for the registration fee, the gas, and one night at a budget hotel. He had printed 50 copies of a simple brochure about his business. He had put on his best jacket, navy blue, slightly too big in the shoulders, and he walked into that convention hall with a notebook and a plan. The summit was filled with suits, expensive ones. There were venture capitalists, supply chain executives, retail buyers, and a long list of corporate representatives who were there to scout vendors and new partnerships. Marcus moved through the crowd carefully, introducing himself, handing out his brochure, and listening more than he talked. He was learning the room. He always learned the room before he made his move. That afternoon, during one of the networking breaks, Marcus approached a small group near the refreshment tables. He introduced himself, explained what he made, and handed his brochure to a man in a charcoal gray suit who was standing at the center of the group. The man's name was Richard Callaway. He was the CEO of Callaway Industrial Solutions, one of the largest packaging and supply manufacturers in the Midwest. His company had contracts with major retailers, automotive brands, and tech companies. He was the exact kind of contact Marcus had been trying to reach for years. Richard Callaway took the brochure, looked at it for about 4 seconds, and then looked at Marcus with an expression that was not kind. He asked Marcus how big his operation was. Marcus told him honestly, 1 workshop, 2 machines, 11 clients. Callaway made a small sound, almost like a quiet laugh. He said something to the men beside him, just loud enough for Marcus to hear. He said that it was a cute hobby, but these kinds of little side projects usually disappeared within a year. He said the market had no room for operations that small. Then he handed the brochure back to Marcus, turned around, and went back to his conversation. The men around Callaway smiled. One of them glanced at Marcus and then quickly looked away. No one said anything to him. Marcus stood there for a moment. He took the brochure back. He folded it once, put it in his jacket pocket, and walked away quietly. He did not make a scene. He did not say a word. Inside, something shifted. It was not anger exactly. It was something colder and more focused. It was the kind of feeling that does not go away, the kind that turns into fuel. That night, sitting alone in his budget hotel room, Marcus did not feel sorry for himself. He ordered a cheap sandwich from a place down the street, opened his notebook, and started writing. He wrote down everything he had observed at that summit. What companies were looking for, what gaps existed in the mid-tier packaging market, what the big players were not doing for smaller boutique brands. He wrote for 3 hours straight. By the time he put the pen down, he had the beginning of a plan. Not a dream, a plan. When he drove back to Detroit the next morning, he called Amara from the road. She asked how his trip went. He told her it went exactly the way it needed to go. She asked if he made any new friends. He smiled and said maybe not friends, but he met someone very important. She asked who. He said he met someone who reminded him of exactly why he could not stop. Back in Detroit, Marcus went to work with a new kind of seriousness. He stopped spending any energy trying to be seen by the people who were not ready to see him. Instead, he focused entirely on building something that could not be ignored. He reached out to a business development center connected to a local university and signed up for a free workshop on scaling small manufacturing businesses. He reached out to 2 former logistics contacts he had from his warehouse days and asked if they knew anyone in mid-size retail buying. He started documenting his production process, taking quality photos of his products, and building a basic website that actually looked professional. He also had a conversation with his landlord about expanding his rented space. The unit next to his had been sitting empty for months. Marcus negotiated a deal to take it on at a low rate, with the first 2 months free in exchange for some repairs he would do himself. It doubled his workshop space overnight. None of this happened easily. There were nights when Amara was asleep and Marcus was still at the workshop past midnight, running the machines, filling orders, adjusting his pricing model, and responding to emails. There were mornings when he was so tired he could barely see straight. But he still made breakfast, still braided her hair, still drove her to school with a calm face and a steady voice. He never let her see the weight he was carrying. That was the deal he had made with himself the day he became her only parent. 3 months after the summit, something small but important happened. A regional buyer for a home goods chain reached out to him through his new website. They had found him through a referral from one of his existing clients. They wanted sample products. Marcus stayed up for 2 nights straight to make those samples perfect. He packaged them himself, wrote a short personal note, and shipped them out. A week later, the buyer called back. She said the quality was one of the best she had seen at that price point. She wanted to talk about a contract. Marcus sat down slowly in his chair, took a breath, and said he would be happy to talk. His voice was steady. His heart was pounding. This was the door, and it had opened just a crack. That was enough. He knew how to push it the rest of the way. The call with the regional buyer, a woman named Patricia Osei who worked for a mid-size home goods chain called Harlow and Pine, lasted 47 minutes. Marcus had prepared for it like it was the most important conversation of his life, because it was. He had printed out his pricing sheets, laid his production timeline notes flat on his desk, and had a glass of water nearby, because his mouth went dry every time he got nervous. He answered every question clearly. When she asked about his capacity, he told her the truth and then told her his exact plan to scale. He did not fake it. He did not oversell. He showed her the math, and he showed her the discipline behind it. Patricia appreciated that. She later told him that she had worked with vendors who promised everything up front and then delivered almost nothing. Marcus was different. He was careful with his words, and his words matched his actions. By the end of the call, they had agreed on a trial order, 48 custom display crates for a seasonal home goods collection that Harlow and Pine was launching in the spring. It was not a massive order by industry standards. But for Marcus, it was the single largest contract he had ever signed. The total value was just over $22,000. He told Amara that night over dinner that something good had happened at work. She asked what. He said they got a big order. She asked how big. He held his arms out wide. She laughed and asked if they were going to get a new van now. He laughed with her and said maybe one step at a time. But inside, he was already calculating. He knew that if he delivered on this order perfectly, on time, under budget, with exceptional quality, it would open a door that went far beyond Harlow and Pine. He used a portion of the contract deposit to purchase one additional piece of equipment, a semi-automated edge sander that would improve his finishing quality and cut his production time by almost a third. He hired one part-time worker, a young man named Dion from his neighborhood who had done carpentry work before and needed a steady gig. Marcus trained him personally, showing him every standard he held his products to. He was firm but fair, the way his grandfather had been with him. The next 6 weeks were the hardest stretch Marcus had worked through in years. He was running his workshop for long hours, managing a new employee for the first time, making sure his existing clients did not feel neglected, handling all the administrative side of things himself, and still being a full-time father every morning and every evening. There were days he moved on nothing but coffee and stubbornness. But the order came together. Every crate was built exactly to specification. Every edge was clean. Every hinge sat perfectly flush. When the final shipment went out, Marcus stood in the middle of his workshop and let himself breathe for the first time in weeks. Patricia Osei called him 3 days after the delivery. She told him the buying team had opened the shipment and gone quiet for a moment before someone said out loud that these were the best display crates they had received in 4 years of sourcing. She told him they wanted to discuss a follow-up order, this time 3 times the size, with a standing quarterly contract. Marcus wrote the number down on his notepad. He underlined it twice. He said he would make it work. He thanked her and ended the call, then sat back in his chair and looked up at the ceiling for a long moment. Word moved faster than Marcus expected. Patricia had shared his work with 2 other buyers in her professional network, something she did not even tell him about up front. Within 8 weeks of that first delivery, Marcus had received inquiries from a boutique furniture chain in Ohio, a specialty grocery brand in Illinois, and a national e-commerce company looking for custom wooden shipping boxes for a luxury product line. Every single one of them had been referred by someone who had seen or heard about his Harlow and Pine work. Marcus hired 2 more workers. He renegotiated his workshop lease again, this time taking a 3rd unit. He bought a used delivery van, still secondhand, but newer than the one he had, and the brakes actually worked properly. He set up a proper bookkeeping system with help from a small business advisor at the local development center. He opened a separate business account and started paying himself a real salary for the first time since he had started the company. It was modest, but it was real. He also started being more intentional about his business identity. He hired a young woman he met through a community program to help him redesign his logo and update his website. He began documenting his work on a simple social media page, not to go viral, just to show the craftsmanship. He posted photos of the finished products, short clips of the process, and occasionally wrote a few honest lines about what it meant to build something from nothing. People responded to it. Orders started coming in from the social page too, small ones at first, then larger ones. Through all of this growth, Marcus never forgot where he had started or who had made him feel like he did not belong. He did not think about Richard Calloway every day, but he thought about that moment, the handed back brochure, the quiet laugh, the turn back, and he used it, not out of bitterness. He had made a conscious decision early on not to carry bitterness because it was too heavy and it slowed a person down. He used it as a reference point. Every time he was tired, every time something went wrong, he went back to that moment and reminded himself that the only response worth giving was to build something undeniable. About 5 months after the Harlow and Pine contract, Marcus received a piece of news that stopped him cold. He heard it through one of his new supply chain contacts, a man named Gerald who had spent 20 years in Midwest manufacturing and knew almost everyone in the industry. Gerald called him one morning and told him that Callaway Industrial Solutions was in serious trouble. Richard Callaway had overextended the company on a major expansion project that had not gone as planned. A large client had pulled their contract unexpectedly, and Callaway was now hemorrhaging money. The company's main production facility, a large factory on the outskirts of Detroit, had been put up as collateral for a loan that was about to go into default. Marcus listened carefully. He asked Gerald to repeat the part about the factory. Gerald did. The facility was about 40,000 square feet. It had 8 industrial machines, a loading dock, climate-controlled storage, and an office wing. It was everything Marcus would need to scale his operation from a growing small business into a legitimate mid-sized manufacturer, and it was about to become available. Marcus spent that evening after Amara went to bed sitting at his kitchen table with a legal pad, running numbers. He called his business advisor the next morning. He called his bank the morning after that. He pulled every financial record his company had produced over the past year. The contracts, the delivery confirmations, the client testimonials, the revenue growth chart that had been moving in one clear direction for months. He assembled everything into a package that told the story of a business that had proven itself and was ready for the next level. The process that followed was not quick or simple. There were meetings with lenders. There were conversations with a small business attorney. There were late nights and early mornings and moments of real doubt, where Marcus sat in the silence of his workshop and asked himself whether he was reaching too far. Each time that doubt came, he let it sit for a moment, acknowledged it honestly, and then set it aside. Doubt was not a stop sign. It was just a feeling. He had learned that a long time ago. He also reached out to two investors he had been introduced to through the Business Development Network, both of them Black entrepreneurs who had built and scaled their own manufacturing operations. They looked at his numbers, spent 2 hours asking him hard questions, and then told him they were in. Between his own capital, the investor backing, and a small business acquisition loan, Marcus had what he needed to make a serious offer. When the offer went in, the people handling Callaway's debt situation reviewed it carefully. There were 2 other interested parties. But Marcus's offer was clean, fully financed, and came with a detailed operational plan showing exactly how the facility would be used. His track record, though short, was immaculate. Every contract delivered. Every client retained. Every number growing. They came back to him within 10 days. The offer was accepted. Marcus signed the papers on a Friday afternoon. He drove to the factory that evening after picking Amara up from school. He parked outside and sat in the van for a moment. Then he brought her out, and they stood in front of the building together. She looked up at it and asked if this was his now. He told her it was theirs. She held his hand and nodded like she fully understood, the way children sometimes do when the moment is bigger than words. He looked at the building for a long time, and in the back of his mind, for just a second, he saw a charcoal gray suit and a brochure being handed back. He let the image come. Then he let it go. The first morning Marcus walked into the factory as its owner, he did not make a speech. He did not take a photo. He put on his work clothes, walked through every section of the building from one end to the other, took notes on what needed to be repaired, what equipment needed servicing, and where the layout needed to change to fit his operation. He moved through the space like a man who had been planning for it long before it was his. In many ways, he had been. He brought Dion and his other 2 workers with him. And over the following 3 weeks, they cleaned the facility, reorganized the floor plan, had the machines inspected and calibrated, and set up a proper production workflow from raw materials to finished output. Marcus hired 4 additional full-time workers, all of them from the East Side neighborhoods where he had grown up and worked. He was deliberate about that. He had seen too many stories of businesses that grew and left nothing behind for the communities they came from. He was not going to be that story. He renamed the business formally. It had been operating under the name Webb Custom Packaging. He kept the name but registered it properly as a limited liability company, updated all his materials, and had a clean sign made for the front of the building. It was not flashy, just the name, and below it, in smaller letters, the words, "Built with precision." That phrase had come to him one evening when Amara asked him what made his boxes different from everyone else's. He had thought about it for a moment, and then said that every single one was built like it mattered. She had nodded and said that was good. He wrote it down. Within 2 months of opening the factory, Marcus had doubled his production capacity. He could now take on orders that were 4 to 5 times larger than anything he had handled in the old workshop. And the clients were ready. The standing quarterly contract with Harlow and Pine expanded. The Ohio furniture chain signed a longer agreement. The luxury e-commerce brand placed their largest order yet. And word continued to move through the professional networks Marcus had been carefully building. His business advisor told him that the referral pattern he was seeing was rare. It meant that the people who worked with him were so satisfied that they were actively recommending him without being asked. That kind of loyalty was not bought. It was earned, piece by piece, box by box, promise by promise. 6 months after acquiring the factory, Marcus received a phone call from a procurement manager at a national retail corporation, one of the top 5 retailers in the country. They had a packaging vendor they had used for years. That vendor had recently failed to meet a quality benchmark on 2 consecutive orders, and the retailer was quietly exploring alternatives. Someone in their buying department had come across Webb Custom Packaging through a chain of referrals and had spent a week reviewing Marcus's client list, his delivery record, and the quality reports that some of his clients had shared. They wanted to schedule a site visit. Marcus prepared for that visit the way he prepared for everything, thoroughly and without shortcuts. He had the factory floor spotless. He had his production timeline documented clearly. He prepared a detailed presentation of his quality control process, which he had spent months refining and now ran at a standard that matched or exceeded many operations 3 times his size. He dressed professionally but was completely himself when the 2-person team arrived, honest, precise, and confident in a way that was not loud but was absolutely unmistakable. The site visit lasted 4 hours. At the end of it, the lead procurement manager shook Marcus's hand and told him that they had visited 6 facilities in the past 3 months, and that his operation stood out in 2 specific areas: quality consistency and the clarity of his process documentation. She said they would be in touch within 2 weeks. He thanked them, walked them to the door, and then went back inside and stood quietly for a moment in the middle of the factory floor while his workers moved around him, running the machines, building orders, going about the work of the day. He felt something he had not let himself feel in a long time. Certainty. Not hope. Certainty. The contract came through in 12 days. It was the largest agreement Marcus had ever signed. A 12-month vendor contract with a renewal option, covering custom packaging for 3 of the retailer's private label home goods lines. The annual value was just over $1.2 million. Marcus sat with his attorney and his accountant and reviewed every line before signing. He asked every question he needed to ask. Then he signed. That evening, he made Amara her favorite dinner: jollof rice, fried plantains, and chicken the way his mother used to make it. He did not tell her all the details because she was 8 now and the numbers did not mean much to her yet. But he told her that the business had done something very big that day and that they were going to be okay for a long time. She looked at him carefully across the table and asked if he was happy. He told her yes, he was very happy. She said good, because she could tell when he was pretending and he was not pretending now. He looked at her for a moment and then laughed, a real, full laugh, and told her she was too smart for her age. News of Marcus's rise traveled through the Detroit business community and beyond. A regional business publication ran a feature story on him. A single father, no degree, no investor backing in the beginning, who had built a 7-figure manufacturing operation from a $4,000 savings account and 1 rented workshop unit. The story was shared widely. Other entrepreneurs reached out to him. He started receiving invitations to speak at events, the same kinds of events where, not long ago, he had stood in a room where someone had handed back his brochure. He accepted some of those invitations carefully. When he spoke, he did not perform. He told the truth. He talked about the 4:45 a.m. mornings and the nights past midnight. He talked about driving a van with bad brakes because there was nothing left in the budget. He talked about walking into rooms where people did not see him and choosing to stay focused instead of getting bitter. He talked about his daughter, always. The audiences responded to him not because he had a polished story, but because the story was real and they could feel it. One afternoon, about 14 months after the factory acquisition, Marcus received an unexpected message through his business website. It was from a man asking for a meeting to discuss a potential supply partnership. The name at the bottom of the message was Richard Calloway. Marcus read it once. He closed his laptop, got up, poured himself a glass of water, and stood at the window of his office, the same office wing that had once been part of Calloway's own building. He stood there for a while, looking out at the factory floor where his workers were running machines and filling orders that came from clients Calloway had once dominated. He thought about how to respond. He was not angry. He was not looking for revenge. He had never wanted that. What he had wanted was exactly what he now had: a business that stood on its own, a life that matched the effort he had put into it, and a daughter who would grow up watching her father build something real. He thought about the man in the charcoal gray suit, the handed-back brochure, the quiet laugh. He thought about the hotel room in Chicago and the notebook and the 3 hours of writing that came after. He wrote back to Calloway. He thanked him for reaching out. He said that he reviewed all partnership inquiries through his procurement process and that if Calloway submitted a formal proposal through the vendor inquiry page on his website, it would be reviewed like any other. He kept the message professional, brief, and completely neutral. No edge, no satisfaction, no bitterness, just business. He never heard back, and that was fine. Marcus hired his 9th employee the following month, a young woman fresh out of a vocational program who had been trying to break into manufacturing for over a year and kept getting told she did not have enough experience. Marcus looked at her application, interviewed her for an hour, and offered her the job at the end of the conversation. He told her that experience was something you built, not something you arrived with. She thanked him and told him she would not let him down. He told her he already knew that. By the time the first full year at the factory closed, Webb Custom Packaging had served over 30 clients, delivered more than 400 orders, hired 11 full-time employees, and posted a revenue figure that Marcus had once written down in a notebook as a long-term goal. The kind of number that felt almost made up when you first put it on paper. He had hit it in 12 months. He did not throw a party. He took Amara to her favorite restaurant, the one with the fish tacos she loved. They sat across from each other in a booth and talked about school and her friends and a book she was reading. At the end of the meal, she looked at him and said, out of nowhere, that she wanted to run a business one day too. He asked what kind. She thought about it seriously and said maybe something with plants. He told her that was a great idea. She asked if he would help her. He told her every single day if she needed it. He paid the check, left a generous tip, and walked out into the evening with his daughter's hand in his. The city was loud around them, the way Detroit always was, full of noise and life and hard work moving in every direction. Marcus Webb walked through it calmly, the way he had always walked through hard things. One step, then the next, then the one after that. That was the whole secret, really. There was no other secret. Just the steps and the decision not to stop taking them, no matter who laughed or looked away or handed back your brochure like it meant nothing. It meant everything. He had always known that. Now the world knew it too.